Do you like books? I mean, really, really like books? Then you're in the right place. Each week, your host, Sam Hankin, interviews the best of today's top-selling authors and the up-and-coming superstars of modern literature. This is The Avid Reader. Here is your host, Sam Hankin.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Avid Reader, brought to you by Wellington Square Bookshop. Today, our guest is Mark Vonnegut, author of The Heart of Caring, A Life in Pediatrics. Mark is the author of the Eden Express, published in, and the year I read it, 1975, when I was 23, which may show you later on what a couple of grumpy old men we are. I think everyone will realize that by the end of this interview. He also wrote, Just Like Someone Without Mental Illness, Only More So, which is kind of an explanatory title given its author is bipolar, formerly labeled an intractable schizophrenic. The book is written by a bunch of people who reside in the same bag of guts: a pediatrician, a healthcare advocate, a curmudgeon like me, a socialist maybe, mentally ill if he still is, and the son of Kurt Vonnegut. It's also written by a bunch of guys like Einstein, Van Gogh, Yoko Ono, Freud, Aristotle, John F. Kennedy, Lady Gaga, and Kurt himself, along with many others. So you got to have some perspective here. Two old men are writing and talking about the way things were and the way things are now. I wouldn't say that Mark is wearing rose-colored glasses, but I wouldn't say that he isn't either. He tends to rant, he tends to scold, but he also enlightens, teaches, and holds up to a carnival mirror the manner in which our society, especially our medical system, has devolved over the years since he began his practice. His advice for parents and their children is more concise and, in my opinion, valuable than much of what Dr. Spock wrote, if anyone remembers Dr. Spock, and the Bible it was for my mom and millions of others. The other parts of the book bring us memories of his dad and a candid assessment of his former self with all of its vagaries, but not stigma. All in all, it's a book to read not because of his dad, although it reminds me a lot of his dad, and not because it's funny, which it is, and not because it tends to scold, which it does, but because the title tells us what kind of man Mark is. Caring and heart have pretty much left our system of healthcare. Just look at us compared to pretty much every other nation. Medicine is money. That's why between Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, we see ads for drugs that might give someone 3 months who's already taken a basket of medicines that make them feel horrible and expose them to consequences much worse than their disease. But they cost $25,000 a year or more. If you have metastatic cancer, take this and you may find yourself walking down the beach with a half smile, awaiting an end game that may have been prolonged these 3 months, accompanied by pain that's unimaginable. See, there I go ranting.
that means I don't have to.
But my customers in my bookstore like rants. So welcome, Mark, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So what do you want to talk about?
Well, the book is partly it's a love letter to my patients. Dr. Spock never took care of patients. and sort of the way medical care used to be, without looking back with rose-colored glasses, but looking back at a time when the mission of medical care to help people, get better has been displaced by the money of medical care, which along with being greedy in and of itself, and the CEOs who yearly compensation ranged from $20 million to $50 million. I honestly don't know. Maybe I'd like to try, how do you spend $20 million a year?
Yeah.
But what it really points out, which a lot of people forget, is that this stuff hurts patients. We're misdiagnosing, we're mistreating, we're burning out doctors, we're burning out nurses, we're burning out patients, and it's a serious business, and the money is astounding. I had a friend who had adult acquired hemophilia, very, very rare, and he had to have these infusions and stuff, and his bill was close to $1 million.
Yeah.
It's nuts, and the medicines don't cost anywhere near that much to make, and none of the profits, virtually none of the profits, go into research, which a lot of people think they do. But it's also, medical care is supposed to be fun. You go into a room and you say, how can I help you? And you don't know if you're going to find an asthmatic, somebody with or somebody who's just having a rough time, and not my favorite chief complaint, I call it not doing so good in school. But that's what it's supposed to be, and the idea that there are computers in the room, average medical encounter takes less than 10 minutes. Patients are interrupted when they're trying to tell the doctor what's wrong within 10 seconds of starting, and 40% of the time is spent looking at an iPad or whatever.
Yeah, my ENT, I can't talk to him because he's always looking at the screen, dictating. He loves the fact that he could dictate and it's transcribed. Okay, great, good for you. But he doesn't listen to a word I say. And if I do say, or my plastic surgeon takes care of all my basal cell carcinomas, I tell him something, but he tells me that's not true. And like you said, the patient knows more than the doctor. And I say, this is going to be one. He goes, oh, no, it's not. And then 6 months later, it is one.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a nice guy. And then, in fact, the other day he goes, I really enjoy talking with you. And I'm thinking, well, that's great, but it would be nice if you gave me a hand up too.
Yeah. I was told at one point in my career, if I was going to be economically viable, I was supposed to see 6 patients an hour. And that's along with the 2 hours a day spent documenting things into EMRs, which are utterly worthless. And again, they hurt patients. Just a second, my wife will take care of my ringing phone.
Don't worry about it. One of the things I thought when I read the book is the quotes are almost like Virgil leading Dante through the Inferno. They kind of drag you along, and it's really great because then I was thinking, wouldn't it be great to have dinner with all these people? It's and the thing about, and then I was thinking, what holds them in common? And it's because they have a heart and they care, each one of them.
It's a devotion to the truth and saying the truth matters. My favorite one, I think, is Jonas Salk saying, when he was asked if he was going to patent and commercialize, and his response was something like, could you patent the sun? I mean, the idea, the truth is that science belongs to everybody.
Yeah. But can you imagine anyone saying that today?
No, it's absolutely, it's the wonderful hospitals I grew up with. And you can look historically, I think it was Hanneman or something in Philadelphia. I'm trying to, and Bellevue and Mass General, they were devoted to taking whoever came through the door. And now they are called translational. They're creating translational ideal atmosphere for pharmacology, and it's, that's what it's about, generating money with these drugs, which do a teeny amount of good for a teeny amount of people at a horrible amount, huge amount of money anyway.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about, how you and your practice over the years have avoided this in so many different ways, like the deals you make with kids and their parents when they come in. There's no drugs involved. You just say, hey, why don't you take up the French horn, or why don't you take a 2-mile walk every day? Or how about we make a deal that if you do this, your mom's going to give you this. Talk about some of those, because they make perfect sense, but no one does it.
And you have to, there's the other part. I have to have the knowledge that lets me say, no, a kid doesn't have leukemia or whatever the parents came in worrying about. And a lot of those medical complaints turn out to be skirmishes between parents and their kids and stuff. And so I get to do what I have, when I started practice, what most doctors did and hospitals did was 90% taking care of patients and responding to what patients wanted and need and what they said. And 10% was, well, we did have to make enough money to pay the rent and stuff. And all our meetings were about difficult patients. I haven't been to a meeting that talked about patients in 10 or 15 years. It's all about how do we get more money?
Yeah, I know. One of the things that really struck me was when you said sometimes it's good just to walk down the hall with your patient and you weigh him and you measure his height.
Right.
Just think how much that gets done, but no one would understand that, right?
Yeah, and that's what it used to be. And then you have now people who are called people movers who go out there and, or the, reception area, they call it the waiting area. One of the things they know around Dr. Vonnegut, you don't call it the waiting room because it's the reception area. And if that patient doesn't get back in a room within 10 minutes without a good reason, so I've have the feeling I've gotten away with murder in terms of creating a space is sort of like I see a defensive umbrella, which, fends off the incoming missiles, which are aimed at quality care.
I wouldn't bring this up other than the fact, because you hear it all the time, other than the fact that you spend a good deal of time talking about your dad. So what I was thinking when I read the book is every once in a while, I hear your dad, just like people say about me. And some of the ones like when you say thrashing and screaming makes it hard for me to think straight. Or when the kid goes, what did you do with your wife? Or the guy who goes, you say you have to pee in a cup. He goes, why can't I use your bathroom? And listen to this. So there's this nice looking young guy in my bookstore. He's obsessed with your father. I even wanted the collected stories, 7-story press one, which I can't find anywhere. And but there's I don't know if you're allowed to say that the woman who works for me, the girl, is attractive anymore, but I'm saying it. She's attractive. And so every time he leaves, he talks to her. He's talking her up. He would like to go out with her. So she came up to me and she goes, Sam, every time he leaves, as he's hitting the door, he goes, and so it goes. And she's like, should I go out with him or not? And I was thinking, well, wait a minute. The guy who's obsessed with Kurt Vonnegut and says, so it goes. Should I say, yeah, he's a good guy? What should I say? It's a good choice. I think so.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting having watched him go from a guy who couldn't sell cars to save his life, who couldn't get a job at teaching English at Cape Cod Community College, to when he was in Bellevue Hospital, they called him a cultural icon, which just seemed to me, it was funny. I'm lucky because he was not successful when I was growing up. But some of the things he says, and sometimes I half joke when I say he stole a lot of stuff from me.
Yeah, I like the part where you're together and they're asking questions and they say, Mr. Vonnegut, and you say, well, actually, I'm Dr. Vonnegut.
It was great because he turned to me looking for me to answer the question. And yeah, every once in a while there was a big party in Iowa City with Saul Bellow and all these people. And he again was sort of holding forth a little bit, and he said, well, most sons, they'll take some minor talent of their fathers and turn it into a profession and make a life of it. Well, Mark, what do you think you're going to do about painting? I said, I think I'll write, Dad. So
it's like
those were good moments.
It's like when I was practicing law, and sometimes my father would introduce me. He goes, this is my son, the lawyer. He's not a good lawyer, but He's a lawyer. Took him aside. I said, Dad, you realize how this makes me feel? But then I kind of do the same thing to my kids too.
Thanks.
But I can't believe you called a footfall on him. I wouldn't have done that.
that was probably my best moment. The silence in the whole room, because it was sort of a family thing, playing darts, and it had never been done before, and people he took it. He had no real choice. He knew that his foot was over the line.
I don't know if I had the balls to do that. Oh yeah, the other one that reminded me of your dad was when you write the letter to the insurance company and you say, Maggie still has no left leg.
Yeah.
That's your dad, right?
That was reality,
I know,
or prior authorizations for kids who need wheelchairs. Nobody is going around faking the need for a wheelchair. And along with being funny, which it is funny, it's also something that hurts patients and makes medical care, the cost through the roof. And it hurts, it hurts us all.
The other interesting thing, and you can tell me whether one led to the other, is when you talk about your illness and you talk about it being bad chemicals, essentially. And it reminded me of Breakfast of Champions and Dwayne Hubler, and your dad kept saying that in the book, but I was wondering why it sounded just like exactly the way he explains Dwayne's behavior.
But, and that's one of the things he stole from me.
I was
There's no doubt, because he came, I remember in the hospital his saying, well, this time you can't blame parents for it. And I was explaining it as neurochemistry. And yeah, no, it had nothing to do with him or my mother. I said, not that you were perfect.
Well, your family's history, including your dad's, I assume, well, is your family genetically predisposed to this?
Yes.
Okay.
And the bipolar comes right down the side from my mother, her mother's father, and at least two siblings of mine. And people assume that it comes from my father, who I think was mostly PTSD from incredible things that happened to him in World War II. And my sister's saying, well, it's not bipolar. He's not okay in the head, but we don't know exactly what to call it.
And he kind of, I'll be 70 in May, and I'm kind of like your dad. I've been complaining. I've been saying I'm going to die and I'm old since, and I've been saying I'm 70 since I was 68.
Yeah, well, it's, you're practicing.
Exactly. And the thing is, I'm really healthy. Oh, I have COVID right now, actually. And it's, and this is something irreverent like your dad would say, but COVID has been great to me. I mean, I feel great. I feel like I got a shot of vitamin B12. But again, that's cancel culture. I can't say something like that, but I do. And the other thing in your quotes is, see, I end up doing this. I end up like your dad holding, I talk, and we're trying to sell your book, that's the whole idea. But when you, in the quotes, when you do, I can't stand the rain, it's funny because I have 6 different versions of that on my playlist by Humble Pie and Ronnie Wood and Albert King. And then I looked up Ann Peoples because that's who wrote it. So just so you know, Ann Peoples is 14 days older than you.
Yeah. Whatever else you can say about our lifespan, because I'm a few years older than you, the music is astounding. Okay. There has never been, and I don't think there ever will be, a period where the music, was as good as our music has been.
There you go. And that's what I was saying about the rose-colored glasses thing. You and I certainly agree that Cream or the Stones or the Kinks or the Who are better than the crap now. But my kids say like that rap and hip hop are going to be lasting 100 years from now. And I'm saying, no, it's crap. It's not music. But that's what my dad, that's what your parents said to you about listening to the Beach Boys. My mom said that,
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, so what I'm getting into is that maybe we're wrong. Maybe they're right. Maybe this is the way medicine should be.
Not a chance in hell. I mean, I mean, you can't have medical care where the life expectancy is going down, where we have, in terms of infant death or any index you want to look at, we are number 17th in the world. We spend twice as much money as any other country per person, and we have it's just it's horrible. It truly is horrible.
Well, one of the things you say when I said in the introduction about those TV commercials, you said if it went back, if you banned commercials for prescription drugs, I mean, think of the money, and you said it, think of the money there.
Mm-hmm. And all those drugs, they're not for aspirin. I mean, all of those drugs mentioned, I make a habit of looking up the cost, and $100,000 infusions are not uncommon. And the friend who was saved, who had the $1 million bill, is one of the funniest guys on the planet. And, I am boundlessly glad that he didn't die, but nowhere else in the world would it have cost close to $1 million.
Hey, talk about the story of your friend who was kind of a juvenile delinquent, but he was, great in sports, great in all kinds of things. Talk about that guy, because that was a really poignant and fascinating story.
He was a guy I thought really kind of saved my life, because I was an outsider on Cape Cod. And when you move to Cape Cod, you're an outsider for a long time. And so the toughest kid in town and the best athlete and stuff like that wanted me to teach him how to play chess, and wanted me to teach him how. And so there was this special kind of being recognized and appreciated. And I think he felt the same thing about me, that he was an outsider. He had been adopted. His adoptive father was, objectively terrible to him. And so, yeah, Chris and I call him Huck because obviously why I call him Huck, but Chris, I think we go in life from island to island. We're kind of hopping from, nutrition, emotional nutrition, to another island of emotional nutrition. And he definitely helped me get through life. And then he ended up, like so many people, dying of a curable disease called hepatitis C.
Yeah, it's interesting that when I was talking in the beginning about the different people you are writing the book, a lot of what drives the book are these stories about your friends or people whose cases you know. And the other one that really pissed me off is the guy who just cut his toe. Was it his toe? And he went
Stepped
into
on a nail.
Yeah. Even when you said that, it hurt me, because I know the square bottom of those nails from working in construction. And I stepped on one, and it always goes through your boot. You have these good boots and it always goes through. But anyway, talk about that story too.
Well, here's a guy who had survived so much and had been a paratroop instructor in Vietnam, and was still working. He's a little older than me, and just paying taxes, living a good life. And he stepped on a nail, and his medical care, he went to an urgent care, which you can have good doctors in urgent care, but this doctor did an unnecessary local anesthesia, incision, and each one of those procedures, at a ka-ching, 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 and said, come back if it still hurts. He came back, it still hurts. They incised it again. Then they sent him to an emergency room. the idea of urgent care was supposed to keep people out of emergency rooms. But if you have anybody who is even the slightest bit complicated, they send them to emergency rooms. And then, you know, in the hospital, and then I'm visiting him in the hospital, just looking at, you know, this atrocious care. And he ended up at Mass General, finally, with a third-year medical student who had the time without a computer to sit down and talk to him and get the story and actually do a careful physical exam. These things, you know, competent physical exams and careful histories don't happen anymore. She made the right diagnosis, and you know, he was his liver was none too happy. His kidneys were failing. He had you know, horrible colitis and was dehydrated. So he damn near died. But the third-year medical student who knew how to use what she learned in medical school saved his life.
Yeah, and that brought home the fact that all this just depends on the person you see. It's
Yeah.
just like you could go to the best college in the world, but if you have at Harvard, but if you have a lousy professor, or you can go to the worst college in the world, but if you have a great professor, you know,
Mhm.
it's like the old saw about what do you call a person who graduates last in his medical class, you know, doctor. um, doesn't that piss you off didn't that piss you off when
Yes. Yeah, and when these things happen, and some of them have happened to me, what happened to my father? Because he was a cultural icon or whatever, he was medically in a situation where survival would have been, you know, unprecedented and because he was a cultural icon, they utterly ignored his medical proxy, who was me. They utterly ignored his living will that said, I didn't want to be intubated. I don't want it to be dialyzed. I don't want, you know, he was very, very clear. It was all utterly and completely ignored.
I like the fact that he got the presidential suite at the hospital, and I know that you wished he was awake so you could tell, and you say that.
Right. It was, you know, in its own way, like a lot of stuff about him is something really, really funny about being in the same bed. And I honestly told them, well, I speak for the family. If George needs the bed, we'll move aside and he can have this bed.
They could share it. The other thing is, you know, sometimes you just go off on what happens in your life that's so funny. So I guess the funniest one is your carpenter's thumb. And the way you describe the cut. Oh, let me see. Let me see it.
It's a 45-degree angle here, because that's if you have to help with your left hand, you get a 45-degree angle if you hit the saw just right.
Yes, that must have hurt like hell. But
Yeah, and then yeah, and so they gave me 2 Tylenol, which I promise you was not to the point. And each of those Tylenol costs $19 because the hospital has to, where they can, make enough money so that they don't get gobbled up. And they did get gobbled up by a big hospital chain anyway. And then again, the honest guy who took care of the hand surgeon could have easily tried to reattach the part of the thumb. He could have skin grafted it. He could have done many things which would have cost thousands of dollars. But he really loved being a hand surgeon, and he said, "We're going to treat this with hot soaks and so on, and we're going to give you some decent narcotics along the way." But yeah, so you look at the difference between honest care and care that's driven by coding and billing and money.
I always wondered whether anyone ever did find the tip of their thumb, even though they couldn't find it.
My son still complains about it. And so you're asking, what was he? At that point, he was like 13 or 14. And my wife told him they had to go into the room to look for the tip of the thumb.
He wouldn't
And
do
he,
it.
no, as only a 13-year-old can. I am not going to go into the garage and look for my father's thumb.
Talk a lot about that reminds me because of what the kid said. you talk a lot about autism in the book, and I love when the kid goes, "So what did you do with your wife?"
Yeah, and he saw this congratulations when Oliver was born and everything, and the kid knew a lot about me and whatever. He knew I had been married and I had a new kid, so his logical question is, what did you do with your first wife? And my answer to him was I buried her in the backyard, and he appreciated that, because ag- again, I've had, fun practicing medicine. It's very, very serious business, especially when you lose a child. There's nothing more tragic. But I also am able to have a conversation with an autistic kid like that.
Do you think that, what do you think the basis for this dramatic increase in autism is in our country?
I think it's partly being diagnosed more. We used to call kids who would have a verbal interaction like I had with that child, we used to call them atypical children. And now it's called autism spectrum disorder. So the definition and the criteria have expanded. I do think there's something going on beyond that in the environment, whether it's plastic bottles or diet soda, or, I think we will find other correlates. But it's, it's, as I say, we used to call them atypical children, and they went to college, they got a life, and so what if they're a little socially awkward? So am I.
Yeah, yeah. We just moved, and I was looking at I found my report card from 6th grade, and I realized they would have dosed me with Ritalin and Adderall out the wazoo. I
Yeah.
was lazy, I was careless, I was a daydreamer,
Yeah, and I couldn't spell, and my handwriting was terrible and stuff. And then, I hate, but owe a lot of my life to standardized tests, because the teachers went back to my parents and said, he's not so dumb after all. So being good at standardized tests has served me well.
Likewise. Yeah, I took a practice SAT test, and I did well, and I go, okay, that seems easy. And then that's how I got into college.
Exactly.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten into any college.
Yeah.
What the quote about autism is a really good quote. What was it about if there were no autistic kids?
Right.
What was
We'd all be sitting around caves congratulating each other. As Temple Grandin, who is autistic, who has, as with her relationship really with animals, who she gets along with much better than people, has written, I think, probably 2 books, and she's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. But there is something about, and I always see it as introverts and extroverts. In most companies, the extroverts are hanging around the water cooler, slapping each other on the back and saying how wonderful things are, while the introverts don't want to be around and they're in the room doing all the work and all the innovating.
Yeah, there's this book by Susan Cain. It's called Quiet,
Yeah.
and it's about introverts. And
Right.
one thing she said that really struck me was that if you're an introvert and if you're in a negotiation or a mediation, you'll do much better, because the other people are just talking and talking and talking, and all you're doing is listening.
Yeah.
So you're the only one really learning anything.
But I give that book to kids and their parents, saying introversion is not a crime.
No. Whereas when you talk about marijuana, I feel the same way. It's like you're talking about these docs who give medical marijuana cards if you give them $500, and there's no, as you say, no medical marijuana doctor who will not give you a card.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think, especially for kids, marijuana is a dangerous drug because it kills ambition, and it makes everything okay, even things that can't be. And you see, real tragedies. Like I have a patient who's going to be in prison probably, another 20 years for attempted murder, because he was doing well on his psych meds, and he found out, oh, but medical marijuana makes me feel good too. And then somebody looked funny at his girlfriend, and he had a kitchen knife.
Yeah, and then at the end you go, but it's legal.
Yeah, yeah. And that was a woman who was losing her baby to social services, and she kept saying, but it's legal. And I said, so is Jack Daniels, doesn't make you a better mother.
Yeah, and that's another thing you talk about. Not that it's easy being a parent, but some of the things you say are just, if the baby's sleeping, let it sleep.
Yeah. Right. No, and I do think that parents today, they're not surrounded by aunts and uncles, and they haven't raised children. A substantial part of my population is from Southie and Dorchester, which are, Irish immigrants, and they stayed together, and they live in triple deckers. And I think raising children is much easier for them because they've taken care of nieces and nephews and brothers and sisters. And you still have these amazing people who have 10 or 11, children, and you say, how the hell do you do that?
Yeah, I know. And the other side of the coin that you talk about is, and I see it every day, is even in the bookstore, is just screen time.
Mhm.
They walk in looking at the phone, they leave looking at the phone. They really never stop looking at the phone.
Right. We have
Yeah.
a sign, no cell phones beyond this point. Everybody ignores it.
Yeah, I know it's true. But, that plus COVID, my granddaughter has not been, she's going to be 2. Her whole life has been during COVID. And so social cues, even with the masks, when I go in, knowing me as well as you know me now, I go into a medical office and I say to the receptionist, I can't believe you're still working here. They didn't fire you yet. But since she's wearing a mask, I can't tell whether she's laughing or she's offended.
I have noticed that if I know somebody from before COVID, I can get enough contact with eye contact that I can know that person. But if it's a new person and I can't see their mouth, I don't know what they're thinking or feeling.
The only time I can really tell is some people have like laughing eyes. You know what I mean? You can tell they're laughing by looking at their eyes, which is a wonderful trait.
Yeah.
And that's the way I can get away with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what do you think about, I mean, are we going to hell in a handbasket? I mean, are you fatalistic about this? Are you cautiously optimistic about anything?
I'm cautiously optimistic. I have a sign over my desk that says, liberal, hippie, socialist, Democrat, I do think that there are things we could still reach a consensus about, which would be enormously helpful. I don't think anybody believes we should be hurting patients. And I think we can look at measures going on in the medical community, in medical care, and say that's hurting patients. And when it hurts patients, like at the price of insulin, then you are going to have, that's the cause of most blindness, most kidney transplant, most amputations. And so if you made insulin affordable, with the rationale, this is hurting public and individual health, then that kind of thing, it's not red or blue. And if you looked at other parts of what have become standard, like deductibles and copayments, which didn't used to exist, and those things are costing, billions of dollars, and they're hurting patients. So I would focus on the hurting patients. And if we got rid of all the things that were hurting patients, we save a bundle of money and we could reach a consensus on what was good and what was bad in medical care. We used to, now I'm talking too much, but
No.
but I mean, look at what we did in the 50s, you know, for nickels and dimes, with the March of Dimes, we eliminated polio. And it wasn't about money. We had entire hospitals which were devoted to the care of people with polio. We ended polio. Didn't cost much. We learned how to cure leukemia. Didn't cost that much. There were no co-pay. You know, now if you have a child with leukemia, God bless the science, but I don't think pharmaceutical industry should take credit for it. It was scientists in the 40s and 50s, but now it's wonderful because your child doesn't die, but on the other hand, you will be bankrupt by out-of-pocket costs.
Yeah, I still remember Halloween going around with those orange half pint milk cartons.
Yeah,
Oh,
it worked.
Yeah, it did work. The other thing that you give people credit for is that you say, even with your anti-vaxxer patients, you say, not patients, the mothers and fathers, you say they're not bad parents.
No, they're good parents.
Right, but everything now is polarized. So
exactly,
I look at them like they're stupid. They're not stupid. They're not stupid at all. They have a different point of view. And what you say is it's the doctors who are responsible to educate them.
Mm-hmm. And this, I mean, humans are social animals. And if your neighborhood or your friends or the people you grew up with are not vaccinating their children, and they will actually look at somebody who is getting the vaccines and they'll say, do you know, they truly believe they're hurting their children. So for me, it's I play the long game of eventually you'll trust us and let us immunize your child. And that often works.
I like the part of the book where when you're playing your rock band and you're playing the sax and you have the signs up around the hospital, and one of them says, they say your name, which is septic shock, and that one doctor, how dare you? And just like your dad, you just kind of shrug. You don't even answer him, you just shrug.
Yeah. And what I think about like doctors who are self-conscious or a sign like that, people in the hospital and people who come in for you, they have more important concerns. I had a patient who learned, I think it was after my second book, and she came back in the room and she said, Dr. Vonnegut, I didn't know you had mental illness. And I said, yeah. And she says, well, Travis has been having these fever, you know, so it's bang, it's gone. So it's doctors who worry about stigma and all these things. Patients are there to see you because you're a doctor. And as I say, Mrs. Jones, they don't care if you have mental illness, which is, you know. So
Yeah. Oh, there's two things I want to, this is funny. So when I look up, I typed in quotes, the heart of caring, thinking there'd be tons of books and stuff like that. First thing that comes up is you. And I'm thinking, now, why hasn't anyone used this phrase together? But the only other thing that comes up is you can buy a Heart of Caring personalized 14-ounce commuter travel mug.
you know, one of my favorite books of all time, I think it's sort of like a perfect novel, is The Heart of Darkness. So, you know, it was taking off of that. So, and I see, you know, medical care, you're going down the river and this happens and that happens. And
you know, it's funny because I always mention this simply because I own a bookstore, but you know, I've said it 100 times on this show, is that people say you can't judge a book by its cover, but every single person who comes into my bookstore judges every book by its cover. And the cover, knowingly or not knowingly, reminds me of one of your dad's covers. It has that same whimsical kind of quality to it, doesn't it? It's just something about the font, right?
Yeah, I mean, people say, you know, my father was a pessimist and black humorist and stuff like that. I said, no, you really have to be an optimist to write that many books. Writing books is really, really hard. And to write 20 some odd books, he was an optimist. I don't hope people don't take this the wrong way, but I am glad he's not around seeing how things have gone now. Same thing for my mother. I wish the perfect exit point would have been after the inauguration of Obama.
Yeah, my mom died a couple of years ago. She was 96. And what year was your dad born? 2022?
22.
Same year my mom was born. And she was in a home, and there's three of us, three boys, and all three of us saw her every day for over a year. And when COVID started, she had died, and I was so glad she wasn't alive, because if she couldn't see us every day, well, she would have just checked out.
Right.
But yeah, she couldn't see her boys every day.
Right.
So yeah, that was like the best death there was.
It was, yeah. And my father, one and done, you fall and you never wake up. That's pretty efficient.
Yeah, my dad stood up between Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy and said, "I feel dizzy." And that was it. That was the end. Sudden cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
Why isn't it illegal to take your assistant's urine and use it instead of the patient's urine? Didn't you do that?
When did I do that? I've written prescriptions for my staff that weren't really.
Oh, that's what it was. That's what it was.
Yes. Oh, I'm sure it's illegal. And I'm sure I've done plenty of other things that are illegal. And and my attitude's always, catch me if you can. And, I would love to be taken to court for doing something that helped a patient.
Yeah. That really struck me too. And that goes exactly to the heart of caring, the idea that, and also again, like, sorry, I keep comparing you to your dad, but if you're going to compare someone to someone, it might as well be their dad, I figure. My son says, no, my brother says I mythologize my father. And I go, well, if you're going to mythologize someone, it may as well be him.
Right.
Yeah. So one of his quotes is that the only proof he needs of the existence of God is music.
Yeah.
And, at first I thought that wasn't apropos to the book. And then I realized it actually is in a lot of ways. And music is a big part of your life too, or was. Is it still?
No, still is. Still is. We still have a guitarist from Septic Shock, and and I have all his equipment under my ping pong table, and I have my saxophones hanging on the wall, and whenever possible we play, and my wife says we sound pretty good for a bunch of old guys who don't practice.
You still play ping pong?
Not as well as I used. I love the fact that I have raised 3 sons who can kick my ass in ping pong.
I am very pissed off that my daughter can kick my ass in ping pong. And I bought her this. Go ahead.
My sons have always said, why aren't you upset? Like the first time they beat me or whatever. I said, because I have raised and coached and fed you hundreds of forehands, and the result is you beat me in ping pong.
You're a better man than I. I'm still just royally pissed off. He's good. Well, so I guess, lastly, if you're writing a novel, you expect people to read it and come away with something, or in their own minds think, okay, what's going to happen now? But when you're writing a book like you've written, what do you expect people, especially younger people, some kid in their 20s or something like that, maybe who picked it up because of your last name, whatever. what do you expect them to take away from it? And then do they take action of some kind? What are you looking for?
I'm looking for a compassionate understanding of what medical care was and could be again, and how insane it is to not have a single payer. And the fact that that is, when you do the math, it's over $1 trillion that it costs us to have this crazy system. And also just to have a sense of what it used to be and what it could be again and what it is in Europe. What you can expect when you go to see a doctor. Not somebody clicking on a pad, not somebody with the earphones dictating, 74-year man in apparent good health and stuff. And I go, Dan, come on. So I do want there to be optimism, and I think that medical care is something we could be optimistic about. The rural America doesn't have hospitals anymore. We've lost 40% of our rural hospitals. We've lost close to 80% of independent community physicians. So I want people to feel, that is fun. Dr. Vonnegut's had a ball. I wish that was available now. And just sort of putting together the pieces of why we weren't able to take care of COVID-19 and the lack of community hospitals. So I want some dots to get connected and people to build a consensus around this could be better.
Yeah, I was looking at one of my reports because I love looking at the reports about me, and it goes, this pleasant balding, this pleasant balding elderly gentleman who's mildly obese. And what's the term for when men develop breasts?
Gynecomastia.
Yeah, and he stuck that in there too. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, I hate it when they're dictating, an apparent good health and what is it, appropriately dressed. I mean, there are all these stupid things that doctors are wasting your time and money doing, and all of our time and money.
Yeah, it's kind of phenomenal. It's exactly like one of your dad's books. It's like Grand Falloons. It's a bunch of Grand Falloons.
One of the things he used to start phone calls with is that, "Hi, Mark, sorry about your profession." And then we'd go on and have a conversation, but he's, he felt that there was a loss. When I broke my arm playing football, we go to Cape Cod community, and they take care of the arm. And I'm sure it was, maybe $10 or $20 or whatever. It was, taking, and now over half the population can't afford an emergency room visit.
Right. Or can't afford to get tested for COVID.
Right.
Or yeah, and Biden says you can expect your free kits to arrive in 7 to 12 days.
And everywhere else in the world, this is taken for granted that we're in a common fight, not that individuals, that's part of what, the idea that individual health isn't connected to the public health. And it having, hepatitis A, B, and C, untreated HIV, untreated, living under our bridges or in tents around Boston City Hospital, that doesn't affect us. In a way, it's like Ebola. We should do something about it. We shouldn't let Ebola wipe us out.
Right. Yeah. One thing now that I have you here and you're an expert, no one, I mean, Republicans, Democrats say, single party, first party, no one understands it. So no kid's going to understand. Why don't you explain that? Because no one understands the difference between third party, first party, any of that stuff.
I think you can explain, you can take COVID-19 and initially all care they dropped the co-payments and the deductibles so that people could get care and could afford care and stuff. And that maneuver wiped out that saved patients and their families billions of dollars. And so we say, okay, why can't we do that for all immunizations? Why can't we do that for whatever? What is the advantage to me for you to pay an extra $100,000? There's no advantage.
No, and it's yeah, there's these COVID paradoxes. It's like even at the bookstore, our income has doubled in the past year. People want to read books now, but it's like I don't understand why for like 30 years Congress has been trying to raise the minimum wage, and then COVID happens and capitalism controls and the minimum wage goes up to $15 an hour, which they should have been paying a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it just happened. And now Republican employees are pissed off that they can't get anyone to work. Well, we're offering them $21 an hour. I'm thinking, well, if they don't want to work for you, too bad for you. You do your job,
right. Right. So that's what I say, the pediatricians, we're fine, but, make, $100,000 to $200,000 a year. I could argue about that, but the fact is they are arguing and being nickel and dimed by people who are making $20 to $50 million a year.
Yeah, I know. And then because of CRNAs a while ago, anesthesiologists got pissed off at them and they weren't making as much money. And then they started opening these pain management clinics.
Right. And some of that you can look at the stuff that Mass General and Bellevue and these famous hospitals are doing, and you can say that's greedy and destructive. On the other hand, you can say they're doing what they have to be to stay alive, because overhead at a hospital and in my office used to be 25%, and now it's 60%. And at 60%, you can't give away care.
As high as 60%?
Yeah.
Jeez.
And that's all. Mass General spent $3 billion on a new EMR. That new EMR is all about coding and billing and not about patient care, even a little.
Yeah. And you invented a better one before that. That was what got me too. But they would never, no, it's like how you say, I think you go, who says, when they say jump, you say how high?
Yeah.
You have no choice really, right?
Right. None. And there are lots of doctors, and part of our training is to be efficient, to avoid unnecessary care. And we do a much better job of it than the insurers. But they get to say, if you don't participate in our program, we will give you 50% of what you're billing now. And at 50%, we all go out of business. There aren't a lot of businesses that can take a 50% hit and keep going.
No, you're right. So you have, it's the lesser of two evils. You still want to provide care.
Right. And so it's a military. I want to have my anti-missile system that's saying incoming, and you get it so you can protect your patients and your providers.
Do you still even take insurance, or are you now just kind of like doing what?
Have to. We take insurance. I could not do what I do without having a mix of, and I love having the mix of people who are doing very well and people who are very poor. One of the things that I don't think people understand is that I get paid half as much to take care of a poor person as I get to take care of a rich person. And the distortion that puts into medical care. There was a time when doctors would talk about grooming the practice. And what that meant is taking a comb through the practice and combing out the sick people and the poor people. And that's how you would, if you were under financial pressure, you groom the practice.
Okay, last question. How long are you gonna keep? Are you ever gonna retire? You're just gonna keep doing this?
I love doing it, but I'm trying to convince the younger providers that this is really fun. And I think I think the pandemic has sort of made people wary, but I would love to sort of keep going and keep my life, looking at 2 years from now, my license expires. That might be a good time to wrap it up. But I think still practicing medicine, keeps me young. And I look at people who retire and go on boat tours on rivers in Europe, and there's something I said, I don't want to do it,
Yeah, my ex-partner goes on those Viking river cruises where the ships have to be flat so they can go underneath the bridges. No, I'm not really.
Yeah.
Something I want to do.
So I'll keep writing, I'll keep doing stuff that's, as I say, I've got a lot of stuff. Maybe our rock band will get better. Maybe.
That would be great. Yeah, it's like we were talking about before we started about Tom Brady. The reason he's still playing is because he loves to and he's really good. Why should he stop?
I think it's for the money. He needs a little more money, and his wife needs a little more money.
He only has $500 million. His wife has more money than he does.
I know.
Well, thanks so much for doing this. Your book is great. When it comes out, because it hasn't been released yet. I forgot what the release date is.
Yeah, Feb 1. It was in November, and then with all the lack of paper or whatever, it's all pub dates have been pushed around. So this is February 1st, and I hope that that's real.
Yeah, there's a New Yorker cartoon where this woman's going, I wonder how long I can use this COVID excuse for. Yeah, well, so when it comes out February 1st, I'm like you. I will break the law. If the box comes and says, do not display before February 1st, nice. I just put them up. What are they going to do, arrest me?
Yeah. My son, this is in a bookstore thing, he found a way to buy, a science fiction books by the foot. And I think he bought 3 feet of books. And I had no idea that Robert Heinlein had written so many books, but there are kids who still read.
Yeah, and that's why, yes, I'm like you. It's like kind of like the Caring Heart, I would hope, is that the reason I have the bookstore is because hopefully I'll change one kid's life. That's all I'm looking to do.
I tell kids, read, it makes you smart.
See, it's like your dad too. Okay, well, thanks again. It'll be on the front shelf and in the window when it gets released. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, see you, Mark.
Yeah.